our demonstration on how to print or make an enlargement. Sorry, I'm just going to tip the camera once so I know that it's shooting in the right orientation. So in the previous video, we made contact sheets, learned how to make contact sheet. Whoop. And in this video, we're going to take one image from our contact sheet, from our negatives, and make an enlargement. The first thing is, once I get done with my contact sheet, I really want to look over all the pictures. A well-made contact sheet is going to tell you which ones are overexposed, which ones are underexposed. You also get to now see it in the positive. You don't want to try to judge your pictures looking at the negatives. The tones are all reversed, and the tones are something that might appeal to you. So as I look across here, there's some that I'm not going to bother with because they're way too overexposed. I'm not going to bother with that are underexposed. There's some images that I like better than others. I've got a composition here that I kind of like. And of the 4 exposures I made of this basic setup, I think this is the strongest exposure. So this is the one I'm going to go with. It's frame 23. So when I find frame 23, and I would probably do this on a light table, I'll look through here and locate frame 23. And let's see, where is it? There it is right here, frame 23. I'm going to take this negative out of the page. Be careful with this. You don't want to risk scratching it or getting a lot of dust or something on there. And now, also at the light table, I would go get my negative carrier from the enlarger, and at the light table, I would open up this negative carrier, take the film and slide it through these little pins. Your film rides kind of just underneath these the heads of these pins. And again, on the light table, you'd be able to see this even better, but I'm going to get it so that you can kind of see it with a little bit of the wall in the background shining through. But I've got one frame of my negative framed there in the negative carrier, and then I'll close the negative carrier. If your negative slides a little bit, it gets out of place, you'll find that you can easily kind of shimmy it one way or the other as you look at your negative. Again, I would do this on the light table. So I've got my negative in place. The next thing I'm going to do is just do a quick dust off of that negative in case there's any loose dust sitting on there that's easy to blow off. For that, we're going to use our can of compressed air. Before I ever spray this at my negative, I always spray it away, clear out the nozzle. If there's any Freon or whatever the coolant is in here, you don't want that spraying directly on your negative. Then when I spray it at my negative, always hold the can straight up and do a couple of quick, sharp bursts. So on both sides. That's all you need to do. Blowing it very gently, that doesn't really do anything. And you definitely don't want to tip this because the liquid coolant can run into the nozzle, spray onto your negative, and freeze and cause a mark on your negative. So hold it upright, a couple of quick, sharp bursts. Then in the dark room, again, we're going to pretend that we're in a real dark room with the lights off, the safe lights on. Take my negative carrier. The downside of the carrier has this ring. You can see this little ridge ring, and that ring is the bottom of the negative carrier. When it goes into the enlarger, it kind of drops in to this little circular cutout inside. So it's going to drop in like so, and then close down. Close the jaws back down. Remember, we've got our timer here. I'm going to switch this to the focus position. So I've got some light going in through my enlarger. Right now it's fairly dim, but I'll brighten that up so we can see there's a little bit of light coming through. My image is being projected down essentially. And then I'm going to turn off the light so we can imagine this a little bit more in a realistic darkroom situation. Right back. Okay, so the light's down, we can see a little bit more, bring this in a bit closer. We can see a little bit more the light that's being projected down. Contact sheet out of the way so you can see this. I'm going to brighten this image up. Oh, it's already as bright as it can go. So that's about all we're going to see in here, but you can see that there's an image being projected. Now, I don't want to print it this big. I have 8x10 paper. It's going to fit in my 8x10 easel. I'm going to set that down here, and now I can use the crank on the side of the enlarger to bring the enlarger down so that the image is better filling the easel. I'm going to actually have this fit so that I see the entire image inside the easel, which means there'll be a little extra space on the sides. That's fine. If you want to blow it up a little bit and fill your whole paper, that's okay too, but just know that your image is a slightly different aspect ratio, so you're going to have to cut off part of the image if you do that. Now, as you lower it or raise it, you'll also need to change the focus. Initially, you can kind of just look at the image and get a pretty decent idea about whether it's close to being in focus or not. Just a tiny. But to get it really in focus, you're going to have to use grain scope. Grain scope, kind of like a little microscope. We put it down on the easel, and when you look through this eyepiece, what you're really looking at through this mirror is the negative itself, and you can tell when you get it into focus. You're going to focus using the knob at the side of the enlarger. You're going to look through the scope. I recommend you keep your eye back about an inch or so to see through it really well. And then you adjust this until you see, you're not going to see any details of your picture. You're going to see this really magnified view of your negative to the point where you can see this kind of grainy structure of all the grains that make up your picture microscopically in the negative. And when you see that kind of sandy, gritty texture, then you know the negative is focused as sharply as it can be. Doesn't mean your picture is in focus, but even an out of focus picture has grain, and you should be able to see that when it's in focus. So that's the sharpest it's going to get. I've got this up to full brightness so that I can see it, but normally if I was going to print, I would stop this down. I'm going to turn the lens and click on down, probably 3 or 4 stops. Now 5 stops is the darkest it will go. I'm probably going to go 1 or 2 clicks less than that. You want this to be about medium dim. In this room right now, with even the little bit of light that I have on, you can barely see anything here. In the darkroom, you'd probably be able to see a little bit, and you want it fairly dim, just not as dark as possible. Okay, so that's my negatives all set to go. I'm going to turn off the focus position back to the timer position. I'm going to set, just like we did with the contact sheet, I'm going to set this for 5 seconds. Now I'm going to get out a piece of photo paper. Again, we wouldn't normally do this in a room with this much light, but it's just for the demo for the video. And I only have a few pieces of paper in here, so I may be ruining 1 or 2 for the sake of education. That's it. You probably have already cut paper in the past down to little strips. If you haven't, you can take a piece of paper over to the paper cutter or use scissors and cut maybe 4 of these out of a piece of 8 by 10 photo paper. Always, always, always put your box lid back on, papers back in the black bag. I'm going to take the shiny side up and I'm going to put it in the easel. If you want to put it crossways or this way, lengthwise, crosswise, that's really up to you. What I try to do is find an area of my image that's going to give me the information that I want. So don't put this across an all light area. Don't put it across an all dark area. I've got a little section here that's sort of the horizon of this picture. And so there's lights and darks and middles all the way through. So I'm going to put it this way. At this point, I'm going to move this in even closer. Okay, now I would take my black card, my light blocker, and I'm going to put it across almost all of this test strip. You'll see there's just a little bit of that test strip paper showing. So I'm blocking out most of it. And now I'll press the button on the timer. Well, you can see the timer right here. Press the button there. And now I'm exposing that little section, just about an inch of paper for 5 seconds. And now that turns off, and I'm going to pull this back a little bit more. It doesn't matter if you pull across left to right, right to left, top to bottom. Might be kind of hard to do it bottom to top, but I've just pulled that down just a little bit more. Hit the button one more time. Okay, so the first one has 5 seconds. Now this has 10 seconds. Or I should say the first one now has 10 seconds. And I pull it back a little bit more and do it again. And we just repeat this process until you've pulled the entire card away. I would say, move it back ½ an inch to an inch each time. If you try to do it just tiny little increments, may be kind of hard to see. But, just a regular kind of ½ an inch to an inch or so is good. Not all test strips tell you everything that you need to know. If you do too few increments, you might not see enough. Okay, that's my last one. Now I'm going to pull the card away and hit that last little bit. So I would have 5 seconds, 10 seconds total, 15, 20, 25, so forth, when this is total. Okay, so now my test strip is exposed, and now I would run to the lab and go process it. And let's just imagine I do. Please hold. Going to develop my paper, fast forward, time warp, and now I come back out to the light after I've developed my test strip, which would probably take 10 minutes or so. And when I bring it out to the light, here it is. And so I look at this and I say, okay, there's 5 seconds, there's 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Well, 30 is way too dark. 5 and 10 are way too light. So somewhere in here, I'm kind of looking for what looks like the right amount. Now, if you want to get really technical, the best way to judge this is by your highlights. If the brighter parts look good, in other words, there's some information in them, they're not pure white, but they haven't gone gray, that's about where you want it. And I would say for me, that's about here. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I probably go around 30 or 35 on this print. Let's say we said 30. Okay, so I go back into the darkroom. Give me a minute, then this is the darkroom again. All right, I'm back in the darkroom. And now I'm going to take my timer and set it for 30 seconds. Okay, or a little bit more tips here. If you make your lens 1 click brighter, you can cut that time in half. Let's do that. So I'm going to make my lens 1 click brighter, and I'm going to set 15 seconds because every click of the lens is twice as bright or half as bright. So if I make it twice as bright, I can go half as long, same thing. So you set your time. If you want to change the lens to make it shorter, figure that out, you can. But basically, I'm doing the equivalent of 30 seconds on my previous test strip. I'm going to get out a new sheet of photo paper, full sheet, 8 by 10. Fold my black plastic bag over. Always put the cover back on your paper. I've got it shiny side up. You can kind of see that shine here. If you're in the darkroom, you can kind of use the safe lights and look at the surface and tell which is the shiny side. Remember though, the paper is always all in there the same way. So once you pull out one sheet, you know, oh, the shiny side was facing up. Then all the rest of it is also facing up. Okay, I'm gonna lift up my easel, put my paper down like so, close my easel down. That's holding my paper nice and flat. And now I hit the button. Actually, what I should do is before I put my paper down, I should recheck the focus. I didn't do that. So put my paper aside, let's just pretend I put it somewhere nice and light safe underneath. I would also go back here and turn on this, open up my lens a couple stops. And you know why? Because the focus just falls out by itself sometimes. And that did fall out of focus. So I'm gonna stop that back down to where I was. Turn off the light. Okay, back to where I was. So here's my paper. I checked my focus. Always check your focus before you make every print. Recheck your focus. Even if you think you got it in focus before, recheck it. So put my paper down there, put the easel down, and now I'm going to press the button. Now it's exposing. For you, it might be 20 seconds. It might be 30 seconds. It might be 35. For me, it was 30 seconds. And I'm doing that with the lens set twice as bright for 15. So same thing. Twice as bright, half as long. Okay, so there's the exposure. Now, assuming I'm in the darkroom, now I take my print out and now I go over to the sink and I develop that print. Let's just pretend that I'm doing that. Fast forward noise. And then I come back out to the light. Okay, so I've been in the darkroom for 10 minutes. I develop my print. I bring it out to the light and hey, there's my picture. And now I can evaluate, did the picture turn out how I expected? It doesn't always. Maybe the first time you print it, it's too light. Maybe the first time you print it, it's too dark. It could be higher contrast, lower contrast than you want. So you might have to go through this process of making another print a few times. Maybe we make the time a little longer if it's too light. We make the time a little shorter if it's too dark. If the print looks like it's too high contrast, we might go with a lower filter number. If it's too high contrast, too low contrast, we might go with a higher filter number. Anyway, and so you might make a few prints to get the one that you like. I think this turned out pretty well. This is a weird little image I made way back in my undergrad days. It was kind of an Alice in Wonderland sort of scenario with Tweedledee and Tweedledum giving Alice directions when it's clear they don't know where they're going themselves. Anyway, so that's my print. And then this would make sure to go through the whole chemistry process, developer, stop, fixer, remover, and then eventually the wash for 10 minutes. And when it was all done, then I could squeegee it off and put on the racks. And there's my print. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you for joining me on this tutorial on how to make a basic enlargement in the darkroom. Bye.